Greetings, paper demons! Today we're talking about color theory. So yesterday I talked about monochromatic color and how that is a really easy technique that you can use for artwork. And just a quick review with some of the terminology, just so we all know what terms we're using here. When I'm talking about hue, and sometimes when I say color, I really mean hue, which is basically which color in the rainbow. And when I say value, that's referring to how light or dark a particular color might be. So hue versus value. So today though, we are going to be talking about analogous colors. So what is analogous colors? Well, it's very simple. What analogous colors means is it means you pick one of the colors on the color wheel and you only use colors adjacent to it in your painting or illustration. Today's color is orange. Let's see here. Orange is here on our color wheel. So if we were to do analogous color palette, that would mean taking this color and then using the colors adjacent to it. So for example, we could do these colors together or these colors. It's 3 to 5 colors that are all very similar to one another, and it's a surefire way to get great color in your artwork. So if you're unsure what to do for a particular painting, what colors to do, going with an analogous palette will always win. And I know you have some burning questions like, Susie, why are you wearing a Charmander pajama suit? Well, there's 2 answers to that question, and the first is clickbait, and the second is because today's color is orange. Of course, I'm going to wear my Charmander onesie because it's orange and today's color is orange. So that is the answer to that. So let's take a look at what this might look like in a painting. So I have a drawing I can pull up here, and we're going to color this guy. This is one of my characters. He's a burrito. He is a burrito security guard, and I'm going to paint Burrito with an analogous color palette. And today's color is orange, so we will use orange. So I'm going to start filling in some colors, and I'd love if you have any questions about color. I would love it if you ask in the chat, because I love to answer questions. Pick the right pastel here. Okay, so this brush is giving me a hard time, so let me change. Okay, so I'm gonna create a little palette over here just so I know what colors I'm working with. And I think I like to work with a yellow orange. Maybe I'll go over to yellow. Yeah, let's go with that. So that would make it a pretty analogous palette to work from. Burrito, he's wearing foil, so I'm going to use some gray. He's wrapped in foil. I'm going to add more orange for dramatic effect. Burritos aren't really yellow. We have this bright yellow here. We're going to desaturate it and make it lighter. One of the techniques that I like to do when I'm painting, this isn't really like a correct, it's not like the only way you can do something, but one of the things that I like to do, it's like a style type thing, is if I am coloring something that's darker, I don't always like to stay in that hue. So for example, this burrito area, the actual skin of the tortilla is yellow, and I could pick a dark yellow for the shadows if I wanted, and that would be perfectly fine to do. But what I like to do instead is, as I get darker or lighter, I will pick a more appropriate color that is more saturated. So for example, I can go more to the orange side, because as we go more towards the red on the color wheel, I'm not sure if you can see this in the upper right, but as I drag more towards the red, the color actually gets darker, but is still very saturated. So I can go to the orange side, and I have a rich saturated color. Let me actually show it with another example here. Let's say I was painting an apple. I have an apple. Now I could go for pink to do the highlight if I wanted. I could do that. That would be perfectly fine. But what would look cool to me, what I think looks cool, is to actually go into the oranges and into the yellows. See how that kind of feels different? Likewise, when you go into the shadows, you could start to go into the cooler colors. Kind of has a different feeling or look to it. But that's like a more advanced. I would suggest, if you're still new playing around with color, sticking to the straight old color palettes that we're talking about here is a great place to start, which is, you know, the monochromatic color or the analogous color. So I'm going to continue painting this out, but I'm on the wrong layer. I'm going to start to add some reddish orange in here too. So what's nice also about this analogous palette, not only is it easy, but it's just keeps your colors feeling very unified because they're all similar on the color wheel. And tomorrow we're going to talk about another palette that is also on dealing with the color wheel, picking from the color wheel, using the color wheel as our guide, because that's what the wheel's for, is to be our guide. Another thing to think about with color is thinking about how warm or how cool a color is. Come back to my notes. Burrito. Okay, so here's our color wheel again. So some colors are considered warm and some are considered cool. So for example, these colors are warm and these ones are cool. Purples, blues, greens are cool. Reds, oranges, yellows are warm. When you have a palette that is warm, probably want to also have the grays be warm as well, because if you go with straight up gray, kind of like I had started to paint in Burrito and his foil kind of didn't feel like it was matching, I just warmed it up a little bit and made it a little bit on the orange spectrum so that it would feel warm. Burrito, come back to us. So I'm just changing these grays to be warmer, so have a little bit of the hue in there because it feels more. I'm going to add a little bit more variation in the background just to make it a little bit more interesting. And if you look at skilled painters, what they'll do is like an area that you'd think would be painted one color actually is a series of strokes of slightly different colors. So that's kind of similar to what I'm doing here. Just makes it a little less boring or more visually interesting. Now I could fill this in black, totally okay to do that, but just to make the colors feel a little bit more unified, I'm going with a brown because brown is dark yellow or dark orange. And that core shadow for the side of the burrito. And then we'll fill in his badge because he's a security guard. He's got a badge. Someone's calling me. Who's calling me during my live stream? Oh, it's totally junk. Oh no, wait, no, it's the pharmacy. I don't need to know. I don't need to answer that. Gosh, guys, don't you know I'm during the live stream? Okay, I'm gonna make this a little bit darker. Oh, my phone fell. Ouch. Make this a little darker, make this drop shadow, or not drop shadow, but cast shadow, like we learned about yesterday, making this cast shadow a little bit more convincing. And it's also totally okay for that cast shadow to have a gradient in it. You don't have to have the entire cast shadow be exactly the same darkness, because there is also reflective light that will lighten the shadow area. Okay, it needs a little bit of a highlight here. It's not convincing enough. Let me try doing it with a black pen. Since it's a shiny surface, back to our pastels. I think this burrito needs a few spots on it, because usually don't tortillas have those little brown spots on them? Let's see if we can make that happen. Let me add some shading to that star. Now I could do a dark yellow to it, but I like to increase the saturation instead, so by going around the color wheel. So I'm gonna use an orange instead to add shading. That keeps our saturation high. I do this all the time because I really like bright colors. Now I'm gonna add some highlights. All right, the only thing I think I would change is I think that his little burrito collar needs some more shading. You can see, like, I know this is like a really simple illustration, but I kept the colors fairly simple and I still had like a wide variety of colors that I could use because I have not just the hue to work with, but the value. So how light and how dark those colors are, there's still a lot that you can do with it. So I strongly encourage you to try out an analogous palette like this because it's much more flexible than the monochromatic one that we talked about yesterday and gives much more richness and it looks more interesting, but it's basically you can't fail at it because it's restrictive enough that your color will look great because there's no way to screw it up because it's these colors are intended, they work well together simply because they're so close to each other on the color wheel that like you basically can't go wrong. But you still, as I said, have the flexibility to use a lot. You can have a lot to work with because you can adjust the saturation, adjust the value, the lightness, the darkness of the color. Every time I think I'm done, then I find one more thing I want to change. What if you want to emphasize something, say like in Schindler's List, the girl in the red dress? You can do that. You can have one area that is colored but it depends on if you think it feels odd or not. Like if it has a large part of the, it's definitely not a hard and fast rule. Let's put it that way. So like, for example, if the object that is only using that color is there for contrast purposes and it's there specifically to draw your eye, then I think that's fine. And I think that this applies pretty much anything I say. So by having one thing in the camera or one thing in your illustration that is using that color and it's like, look here, this is where your eye should go. Like that is perfectly valid and useful technique to do. So I'm not trying to say don't ever have one color that is only used in one place, but I will say if it feels out of place, it's because it's drawing your eye and you don't want to draw your eye there. So in this case, I had it in the shadow. The shadow is not where I want you to look. I want you to look at Burrito, more at Burrito's face. I mean, if he had a face, he doesn't have a face, but I want you to look at Burrito. I don't want you to look at his shadow. His shadow is not the area that we want to draw the eye to. So therefore, by changing the color so that that color isn't used there, or by adding that color in other portions of the painting, it makes it feel more unified so that the eye isn't getting drawn there. I could even, if I wanted, I could go even further around the color wheel and add more red, but I think that would probably overcomplicate it. That's pretty much all I wanted to cover. That's the end of this live stream recording. Would you like to join me live during one of these live streams? Join my mailing list so you can hear about my live streaming schedule. A link is in the description below. Thanks so much for watching and being a part of the Paper Demon community. Don't forget to click like and subscribe.